Hey, kia ora, Markie here, day 10, recovery bunnies. Okay, you're doing really well. And it has struck me that I probably should have covered today's topic at the beginning, really, because it's one of the fundamentals. But it's always good to revisit stuff with this RJ business. Recovery is, it's not a kind of single process. It's, it's not like it's not a linear process. Let's put it that way. It's kind of you revisit things all the time. Might do a video on the cycle of change at some point. That would be a good one to look into. I'm sure there's some other videos of the cycle of change, but that's a good thing to look into, actually. Yeah, maybe we'll talk a bit more about that in the next one. So, my lovely recoverers. Basic thing, one of the fundamentals, one of the first things ever is to stop asking your partner questions or questions about the RJ stuff. Obviously, you ask them questions about, what's for tea, or where do you want to go tonight, or stuff like that. But not questions about your RJ. And that really is not just about questions; it's about the pursuit of information to reassure yourself, to take away the anxiety. Okay, so that includes what's kind of generally seems to be called snooping, or research, or trying to find things out in any way whatsoever, really, about the things that trigger you. Okay. So, and this is an interesting one, because this is a kind of, if you think of RJ as a cycle, a self-perpetuating, eternal cycle, eternal until you do something about it, that is, and the seeking of information, the asking questions, is an integral part of that cycle. So if you stop doing that immediately, you have begun to dismantle the process. Okay, it's that fundamental. Okay, so and there's some interesting kind of theory around this. So one of the things that kind of is generally kind of held to be true around any kind of anxiety condition or disorder, and RJ is essentially an anxiety disorder, being obsessive compulsive disorder, which is all about anxiety. Is that the theory is that if we get anxious about things that are unfamiliar, where there may be danger, or we perceive, a better way of putting that maybe is we perceive or fear danger in the unfamiliar. Okay, but when it becomes familiar, we realise that it's no longer dangerous, and we acclimatise, adjust, adapt to the situation. So, for example, I don't know what you're like with public speaking, but if I asked you to deliver a speech to a group of 500 people, that might raise some anxiety. But if I asked you to do that every day for 10 years, I'm using hyperbole here, obviously, you won't have, your anxiety is going to be gone by that point, because you've just become so familiar with it. So one of the theories is that anxiety around things, where it doesn't go away, is where we do something called safety behaviours. This comes from cognitive behavioural therapy kind of theory. So safety behaviour is something that we do to reduce anxiety. So in case of retroactive jealousy, a safety behaviour is asking questions, seeking information that gives you that temporary reassurance, and then sets the whole process off again, because the answer to that question then spawns a million other little baby questions, and then the whole thing kind of goes on ad nauseum. So a safety behaviour sounds like a good thing, but a safety behaviour is not a good thing when it comes to anxiety. So safety behaviour is something that you do to reduce your anxiety, so that you never truly feel the anxiety, and you never truly overcome the anxiety. Okay, so using that public speaking analogy, if every time if I asked you to do public speaking every night, and every night you got completely rat-arsed, then you wouldn't fully be present in the situation, and you wouldn't be in touch with the fear, and you would still have that anxiety. And if at any point you did not drink, and then did the public speaking, even if you've been doing it for 5 years and then you suddenly decided to do it sober, you would probably have the same kind of levels of anxiety as if it was the very first time you'd done public speaking at all. Okay, so that's what a safety behaviour is. So I'm trying to think if I can give you some other examples. Often they're kind of funny things, safety behaviours. So often they're kind of habits. So sometimes people feel more confident if they fidget in a certain way, there's kind of certain ways in which people kind of reduce their anxiety, sometimes in quite a superstitious kind of way, and they're all kind of safety behaviours. They stop you feeling the full extent of the anxiety. So obviously anything that numbs feelings, any kind of drug or alcohol, kind of behaviours would be kind of classic examples of safety behaviours. So can you see there that asking questions, seeking information is a safety behaviour? It kind of reduces the anxiety temporarily, and so if you didn't have something which reduced the anxiety, then you would experience it peak and then decline. Okay, and this is an important thing about anxiety, is that so anxiety on a graph, when we're anxious, and we can feel all the physical symptoms of anxiety, the stomach going and sweating and shakes and whatever, we think that anxiety, if it's on a graph and it's going up, then we think it's just going to go up and up and up and up and up and up, either with no end or to a point where our head explodes. Okay, but actually it never does. Okay, what anxiety always does is it goes up, reaches a peak, and then goes back down again. Okay, so, and it's important to experience that. If you experience that, then you mind knows that's the course that it takes, and the anxiety is the back of the anxiety is broken. The battle is won with the anxiety on some level. You might still experience anxiety again with the same thing, but it would be slightly less each time. Okay, unless something terrible happened, like unless you got attacked by a crocodile or something, and then you have an association with being attacked by a crocodile, and the anxiety would get worse. But that's a different thing, and crocodiles don't really come into this picture. But what tends to happen is people think that the anxiety is unbearable, and therefore they do something to try and alleviate it, which usually, so that's a safety behaviour, and that's usually something kind of slightly dysfunctional or very dysfunctional. So it's just another way of expressing the same thing, really. But yeah, on a graph, anxiety goes up and then it goes back down again. Okay, and the body has to do that because the body can't sustain periods of high levels of anxiety indefinitely. It's just can't. There's too much energy, so the anxiety has to kind of go down. Now, obviously, there's background levels of anxiety. We're talking about peaks of anxiety, but peaks of anxiety, your head never explodes, and it's impossible for that anxiety to keep getting worse. It has to actually ease off, and that's just physiology. That's just the body can't sustain that level of what we call arousal. I don't mean sexual arousal, physical arousal. Okay. So that's kind of some of the theory behind why asking questions sustains and perpetuates the RJ, is part of what creates it, part of what sustains it, keeps it going. And it also would explain why it's so hard to stop, because that temporary relief is so tempting. Okay, so when you stop asking questions, you will experience pain. Not physical pain, maybe something worse than physical pain. You'll experience, anxiety, and you'll feel very unsettled and agitated, and you want to do it, you just, every fibre of your being wants to seek that reassurance and ask those questions, or whatever it is that you need to do, or you don't need to do, whatever it is you feel you need to do. And that's why early recovery for RJ is really difficult. So something to bear in mind, okay, is be kind to yourself, because you probably will have some lapses, some slips, okay, where your intention is not to ask a question or not to seek information, and you do. And it doesn't help to go into a complete state of despair and think, oh my God, I've failed, I'm useless, I've done it wrong. And the thing to do is to say, okay, that's kind of human. It's not what I wanted to do. And next time, you know, I'm going to do everything within my power to make sure that that doesn't happen. But if it does, it does. Okay, it's not the end of the world, and you can learn from it. Okay, you can actually examine the thought processes that led you to that. That's something called episode analysis, where you look at a relapse and you pick it apart and you look at, you know, where the first relapse thought occurred, which is often a long time before the actual action. So, you know, sometimes with you know, that kind of slip of you resolve not to ask any questions, and you do ask a question, you might think that you decided to ask that question in the moment, but actually the unconscious or semi-conscious thought processes that led up to that might have been kind of ticking away in the back of your head for a week or more. Okay, so there's all good learning with this, and the cycle of change is kind of, or the way I use the cycle of change, I look at that that process as well. Use that to illustrate that process. We'll do the cycle of change at some point, but the cycle of change is going to take more than a short video to explain. So it's going to be a longer video. So I'll have to think about how I'm going to do that. Anyway, so let's recap. So the golden rule, this is what I call the golden rule. I'm not sure if I invented that term or if I borrowed that from Zachary Stockhill. The principle comes from Zachary Stockhill, and he's absolutely dead right on that one. So the golden rule is stop seeking reassurance through information. Okay, that will be hard. That will be very hard, and that's why getting support of other people can be really important. Using something called bookending can be very helpful as well. Bookending, we'll do a video on bookending. And having a recovery buddy. We'll do a video on bookending and recovery buddy and cycle of change. So don't be too hard on yourself, but the sooner you can break that cycle, the better, okay? And you will feel anxiety, and if you can actually allow yourself to feel that anxiety, knowing that it will ease off at some point or other, your head will not explode, the world will not end, or the world might end anyway, but it's not going to end because of your RJ thoughts and your and the fact that you're not asking questions, okay? And some people just never get past that first thing. This is the first step, really, the golden rule. Never get past it. Okay, you won't get well if you don't get past this bit. So whatever you need to do it, whatever help you need, make sure you do it. So, and then we talked about the kind of some of the theory about anxiety in general and how we fear new situations because if you go to a new part of the forest, you don't know whether there's a tiger there. But if you go to that new part of the forest every day, it's no longer a new part of the forest, and you've already checked it out for tigers, and you know that it's safe. So that going to that part of the forest should not make you anxious. But if you go to that forest, that part of the forest every day, off your face on mead and wearing a suit of armour, then you will always have some anxiety about going to that part of the forest. So I hope that makes sense, and please excuse my kind of very bizarre analogies. I was trying to go kind of primeval then, you know, kind of like early humans before civilization, and you know, forests and tigers, and then I got very medieval with the mead and the suit of armour. So I don't know quite what went wrong there. Need to work on my analogies. So I hope that's helpful. It's useful, I think, to know a little bit of theory, particularly around processes like anxiety and things like that, because we get lost in them. We think that we are the anxiety, but knowing a little bit of theory means we can kind of step outside it. And one of the ways of kind of getting out of dysfunctional thought processes is to is to have a kind of mind like a scientist. And even while you're in an anxiety state, if another part of your mind is kind of like a nerdy scientist in a white coat that's thinking, oh, that's very interesting. I'm observing that, I'm thinking that the anxiety is going to get worse and worse and worse. How interesting. That's very helpful. That observer self, as it's sometimes called. Okay, so that was number 10. That was a biggie. Maybe it should have been number 1. I didn't plan this really. I kind of, it just occurred to me that it'd be a good idea to do a program for the lockdown. And I kind of just went with what came into my head on each day. So there's going to be part 1, but it's always worth revisiting. So good luck. Keep at it. If you are determined and you really mean business, you will get there. And I'll do another video on how sometimes we don't really mean business. We're not sincere in our desire for recovery, which sounds weird because retroactive jealousy is such a horrible thing. How could we not want to get rid of it? But actually sometimes we don't. So we'll touch on that in another one. So that's good. It's got lots of ideas for new videos. So lots to look forward to. Golden rule, most important thing. And Rangimarie.